Okay, this is Sally Hanley from Sisters in Crime, South Carolina Upstate Chapter. And I'm pleased to start this meeting of the Mystery Book Club with George Cramer, whose book we read this month called Robbers and Cops. George, I'm going to admit another person who's also coming in is Sally Handley. I swear, I have nothing to do with this. But as soon as that person comes in, yes, there she is again. You're named Sally Handley again. Can I ask you to unmute and tell me your name? We don't know why this is happening. And the funny thing is, it does not happen with our regular meetings. So can you tell me your name, please?
Yes, of course. Darlene Record, and I'm with the PSWA.
Darlene, could you spell your last name for me?
RECORD, as in record.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. All right. You are yourself now. Okay. So George, take it away.
Well, I want to thank Lynn, Darlene, Caroline, and Gloria for forcing their way through the maddening crowds to get a place here this morning. It's good to see you all. Yeah. Well, great. It's good to be here. And I'm glad to talk about Robbers and Cops. There's a new edition out. Yeah. Well, I go over. Pam Meyer is going to be on my blog here soon. Asked me if I'd like a miniature. Yeah, what's that? And here comes this little tiny book. Anyway, I'm here to talk about Robbers and Cops. Tell you a little bit about me. I think most of you know me. I was born and raised in California. Joined the Navy to see the world. Hey, there's another Sally.
There's another Sally.
Went to boot camp in California, got stationed in California. And the only time I ever left the state of California, hey, good morning there. Michael Black is his name.
I know him. I'll change his name.
Anyway, I got out of the Navy early to become a San Leandro, California police officer. I was there for a lot less time than Darlene and Mike were at their places. 16 years. I was retired officially for on-duty injuries, actually for stupidity. When I was a young policeman, I kicked in a door in another town, and they called me Crash Cramer, and I loved kicking in doors. And I tried to kick in a steel frame door and shattered a knee, messed up the back. Then I spent, and I'm giving you this background so you know a little bit when we start talking about the book, to give you some feel for it. Oh, no, now I lost myself. Oh, and after I worked narcotics for about half of those 16 years, which was wonderful, and yet it was pretty much terrible. My last day in narcotics, I came in early. I went into the chief's office and told him, you have to transfer me out of narcotics. The crooks are becoming the normal people, and the normal people are becoming Adam Henrys. A part of this came about because I was walking down the street in my regular work clothes, and people were stepping aside to not have anything to do with me. So when I retired, I spent over 30 years working as a private investigator, corporate investigator, and loved it. I worked for Palm, as in Palm Pilot, and we got bought out by Hewlett Packard. They wanted our patents. We came up with, we really put out the second smartphone, but it was nothing compared to what Hewlett Packard was able to do, and Apple was just unbelievable. Anyway, so there were 1,150 of us. I got the layoff reports every Monday for the following week. And so when mine came through, I was number 1,100. So I quit, started applying for work. And Gloria, you're going to find this very hard to believe, but I learned all about age discrimination. I started applying for jobs everywhere. And finally, I decided to make a spreadsheet because it was underwhelming my results. I even reached out to HR directors and hiring directors who I'd worked with, but nothing. Along the road, I always swore I would never ever in my life go into a senior center. Well, the city magazine came out and they had a writing class. So I thought, maybe this will help me with my resume and I'll be able to get past all this crap. One other antidote, one of the jobs I really wanted, and 3 or 4 people that were at this startup sent in my resume, got a call. Anyway, they hired I call him a kid, he was 40. He'd had 5 jobs in the last 5 or 10 years. And he came to me and he says, George, they want me to make a policies and procedures manual. Would you write it for me? Well, what you going to pay me? Nothing. I need it as a favor. My wife told me that if I wrote a policy manual for this guy for free, she'd leave me. So I decided it was best to stay. Anyway, this writing class turned out to be fiction writing. And within 3 or 4 sessions, I gave up looking for work and decided I wanted to be a writer. And I started work initially, got to go over here, on Robbers and Cops. And I think some of you know I had was interrupted by that procedure to go back to school, get an A in English, straight A's, straight D's when I was a young college student, because I lived in a beach house with 4 other guys and nobody did homework, and also an MFA from the Institute of American Indian Arts. Anyway, when I started writing this book, hi, Sally, new Sally. Anyway, you want to stop for a second and get her name?
The person who just joined us, what is your name? Because we're
Not
having
Sally.
You're not Sally. No,
No.
I'm Sally, and everybody keeps coming in with my name. So you want to let me know your name, please?
Rebecca McSwain,
Could you spell the last name?
McSwain.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Good to see you, Rebecca. Anyway, so I started writing Robbers and Cops. And actually, I wanted it to be more of a memoir about the wonderful, wonderful detective George Cramer. Well, I got about 30,000 words in, and I realized that Detective George Cramer just absolutely sucked in this book, even though I called him something else. So I changed the entire book, and he's a side character. This is basically an historical fiction. And with my writing, all of my writing, I'm not a plotter, I'm mostly a pantser, but I generally have the beginning and the end. And my writing is about how do I get from here to there? There's so much in there. And a lot of people have trouble with the middle, so do I. But in this particular book, I was involved early on in the arrest of a full-time career bank robber. Really tough dude. Arrested him on his front yard while he was trimming his rose bush. We did. And he had a brother. They had been robbers together since the 40s, before the 40s. And the brother called the detective that was handling the case across the bay and said, listen, I'm a pretty bad dude. You guys are going to come after me. And if you come after me, some dumb young FBI agent or cop's going to take a shot. We're going to gunfight. And I'm going to tell you that you guys will probably come out on the bad end. But if you guarantee to let my brother and I serve time together at Folsom, I'll come in and surrender. The boys are in their 60s now. So that's actually what happened. So I've got this. Here's my ending, but I don't have the beginning yet. Well, how do I get to this? This is the 1970s. So I go back to when they're born, and I decide, hey, these are some good Southern boys, victims of sharecropping. Their family is sharecropped on a small piece of land that barely keeps the family alive since right after the Civil War. And of course, birth control back in those days was pop out as many as you can. So there's like 9 in the family. So these 2 brothers are the oldest. And long and short, there's deaths, and then they decided to hit the road. And so the next scene is based on one of my cousins, great guy. He was a polio victim, and he knocked up a girl, living at home, and all this stuff going on, and mom and dad are on him to get a job. So every day he goes out and he sits on a bench. Finally, after 3 weeks, Bob says, "Where's your paycheck?" And my aunt was one tough cookie. So he goes down to a gas station where everybody knows him and tries to hold them up. And of course, they knock the shit out of him. And his father is a very strong man and a very criminally prosecution minded. He tells his kid, you did it. You got to plead guilty. Well, today, especially in the county I live in, they'd probably give him a reward or a medal. Anyway, they give him, and he can barely walk. They give him 5 years in San Quentin. He does every day of it. So my 2 dumbass farm boys rob a gas station where they're known, and then they steal a car. They're caught, they're arrested, and the cop tells them, the best thing you do is just plead guilty, get it over with, and you don't need a lawyer. So, they believe in the authority. Judge sentences them to 3 years on the chain gang, Georgia's chain gang. Now, I have all these visions in my mind about from TV and Cool Hand Luke and all this kind of stuff. But I had learned early on from my strongest and harshest critic, Mrs. Cramer, that when you say something, it better be true. You write your fiction, that's fine. But if you talk about something like a newspaper, you better make sure that the guy is not sitting in Los Angeles reading the Chicago Tribune every day. So did a lot of research, made myself a chain gang. A lot of bad things happen on it. And ultimately, it's escape proof. They do their time, their parole sends them one way, and they decide, because another convict tells them, hey, out in Marshfield, Oregon, my brother's putting together a crew. He's got a nice crew. He needs some more guys. So they hit the road from Georgia across the country during the Dust Bowl and everything else that goes with it. And things are pretty terrible. And as we're going across the country, the book describes the conditions at the time, the crap that the people and the farmers are having to endure. And when they make a stop in Chicago, they got very little money, but Al Capone has soup kitchens. And they actually do. He actually did. So they get that, and then they beat their way across country, and they get out here, and they do a series of robberies of Safeway stores. Again, based on actual incidents. In my town, there was one of the old Safeway stores before we moved here, and they were round, semi-round domed. And the man who created Safeway had thousands of these across the US, and everyone was identical in setup. So the robbers knew exactly how to get in, where to go, where the safe was, and all that stuff. And of course, somebody rats them out. Now, those of you who were cops know that that never, ever really happens in real life, that somebody snitches off their buddies. Anyway, a lot of things go on. And I don't want to go into anything too deeply, but I make a point that I try to find historical facts and shape them into the story. So there's a continuity in the historical aspect of it. But I'd like to answer some questions and not just completely read the book to you again.
Well, I've got an observation and a question. It seems to me that there was kind of an empathy from the policeman who was chasing these guys. There was a grudging respect, so to speak. Okay. And also, you know, just at the end, the way that the I forget which one of the brothers had the discussion with the policeman about, like, you know, I'd like to stay with my brother. We'd like to go to Folsom Prison. But they also had a grudging respect for the police. They didn't hate the police. And it seems to me like today, and I'd like to know about anybody with police experience. I mean, is that something that is totally non-existent today? Because it just did seem that there was this grudging respect on both sides of this.
Well, you know, in my 16 years, I worked a lot with outlaw motorcycle gangs. And I even went to a birthday party that turned out to be all angels but me and the girl I brought. And we got along fine. They didn't know I was a cop. We had a grudging, you know, we got along fine. Those that I arrested, I got into the outlaw motorcycle gangs because I was terrified of Hell's Angels. And so I thought, you know, if you got to fear, you got to face it. So every time I'd spot a Hell's Angel, I would find a reason to stop them, jack them up. And I never got over having a smart fear, but respect. And we would chat even, you know, after I would arrest them, serve search warrants, things like that. And it's like one time, Sonny Barger, who was basically the face of the Hells Angels, showed up at a search warrant where I was working, and I was out of cigarettes, and we both smoked Lucky Strike. So I went over and started a conversation and asked if I could bum a cigarette. And his response, Cramer, you're the cheapest son of a bitch I've ever met. And that's the way you talk to people that you know. And there were, you know, there were some that I just flat hated and had no respect for. But the guys who did the robberies, they weren't always, weren't always, I don't want to say evil, but I talked to one robber who we arrested. I didn't, but another officer arrested. And we were chatting, and it was a foot chase, and he was at this corner, and the officer came up like this with his, and looked to the left with his back to him. He said, I could have shot him, but you know, why would I want to shoot a policeman? You know, he's doing his job, and I'm a robber. I'm going to get caught sooner or later. So he dropped his gun and says, here I am, officer. You know, so there's a bit of respect and back and forth then. I don't think it's anywhere near as great today. as it was back there. And yes, I had a grudging respect for these two brothers. And there is a common response that, hey, it was kind of like you wanted us to like these guys. And it's not that I wanted everybody to fall in love with them, but I wanted to see them, that these are people who by circumstances have done, because of their choices, this is what they are.
So I have another question. It's clear how their experience got them to where they were, but they reached a point where they didn't have to rob banks anymore. I mean, that was my opinion. It's somewhere in the story, like they each had their own homes. The one guy had his landscaping business. What accounts for their continuing to rob banks when they no longer needed to?
Well, boy, that's a hard ball. I never heard that question before. And when you want to stall, you chat a little bit. But I don't think they didn't need money. They needed some. Plus, that's what they did. That's what they did most of their lives. That was their thing. Plus, in there, I mentioned they make trips, and you go to Vegas for a week or two, and you're hiring, women of the night, and you're gambling. That puts a dent in your checkbook. You go up to Idaho or Utah, I forget where, on these big hunts. They're not cheap. So you got to have a little bit of money. Besides that, oh my gosh, Ben is down in Alameda County, and his brother, who I'm drawing a blank on, has the cabin up out of Coos Bay, which was originally Marshfield. He's got that 20-year-old truck. He's got to pay to keep it going.
We got a question from Gloria.
Well, it's not so much of a question as it is a comment, and I have to leave early, I'm sorry. But I wanted to say I was an emergency room physician for most of my professional life. And I frequently had both the cop and the robber and some other victim in my emergency room all at the same time from the same incident. And they were all always worried about how the other ones were doing. So it was really, really kind of interesting. I mean, you could see from the criminal's point of view that he might be worried that if he shot somebody, is he going to die? But it wasn't that kind of concern. It was a healthier kind of concern about having a fellow human being that you absolutely did something to harm, but you were hoping for a good outcome for them. So that was kind of fun. And if any of the writers ever have any questions, give me a yell. I would, because I got to see a whole lot. I worked in emergency rooms in Kentucky, in New Jersey, in California, you name it, across the United States. If I can help in any way to answer a question that would turn something for you or help you with something, I'd be glad to do it.
That's true. Gloria is always there willing to help. Except one time when I asked for her help, and I had this scene all in my mind, and I got a hold of Gloria just because I wanted validation. And what did she do? She destroyed the scene. I was completely wrong.
Well, aren't you
Bummer.
glad that, because every emergency, every nurse and doctors that read it would say, what's the matter with this guy?
Absolutely, absolutely. I told you, I worry about validation.
That's interesting.
Yes.
Anybody else with a question? Because I have another one, and there's another Sally Handley coming in as we speak.
Same.
Okay, I don't know who this one is. We're gonna ask this person to unmute. Well, this is also by way of comment, maybe less than a question, but and this is in no way a reflection of the writing. But you know what really struck me as I read this book? We're so accustomed to television shows where the police solve some really complex crime in a 24-hour period. Okay, like it's 1 hour on the screen, but it's still within 24 hours they solve the crime, right? And when you're reading how the police planned their approach to getting these guys, to capturing them and arresting them, and it was painstaking, and I'm going to use this word, and again, it's not a reflection of the writing, but it sounded so boring, like it's so, and then to have it all blow up at the end because this guy just happened to be very perceptive and knew that they were coming after him and figured they were coming after him. But it really struck me that our impression of the work that police do is that it's like, this constant motion and excitement, and it's not. It's painstaking work.
Yes.
Is that true? Am I right about that?
Yes, and I realize, and one of my critique partners always gives me hell, but I don't mind throwing in a little boring so that you know what the real procedures are. In fact, when my original working title was Robbers and Cops in Real Life, because I wanted it to be real, even if I have to take the action out. It's really historical fiction based on true events. Boy, I bet you saw that on TV a few times, but that's what it is. It draws from things that have happened in my life, in my career, that I've seen other officers work with. And that's why I don't always paint my heroes in such a glowing light as you see on TV. Like, there's a scene where I have to climb over a barbed wire fence to get to my new girlfriend. That happened, So yeah, I want people to see my characters as real people. The good people, the bad people, the ones who make mistakes. These boys did not start out in their life to be career criminals. They were, So I'm sure that Mike and Darlene have had some similar experiences with crooks and what goes on with them. And besides, when I was a young patrolman, I got really, really angry because this guy got away with a crime. I was out of line. And my mentor, who was about the size of Mike there, he says, come with me, calm down. And that basis is in this story because he told me, he said, yeah, Jojo or whatever his name is got away with it. It wound up that Jojo was arrested for felonies 18 times before he did more than 3 days in jail. And then he went away for 10 years, which I thought was unfair. He should have done a week to begin with. He says, but he's going to continue. You don't have to get angry. Just keep an eye on him. And sooner or later, you're going to get him. And I did. And he did 10 years. Man, I'm way out of line here. But anyway, I never got mad at him or defended again. Darlene first, Mike.
Okay.
Darlene.
I really enjoyed your book. I actually read it twice.
Did I get 2 royalties?
Absolutely. And I love the fact you snuck your name in there. That was clever. And I could see investigative George throughout the book. I mean, he did such a thorough job, and you really could follow it. And it did seem like real life.
Thank you.
And I got a kick out of the sergeant who used the red pen, because when I first got promoted to sergeant, they gave me a red pen and I was like, I never used it. I remembered how annoyed I was when it was used on me. And I said, I can't do that. I wasn't that type of boss. But thank you very much for writing. I have a question though. Now, your first book, Mona Lisa, and this book are so different. Did you find one easier to write than another, or what kind of problems did you run into that were different in these books?
Well, I started Robbers and Cops, and that's what I started. And I told you I was interrupted for school, but I was also interrupted because there's the 2 girls sitting there looking at the Mona Lisa. Well, I was in that writing class that didn't help my resume. And one day the instructor passed out a bunch of random pictures. And the assignment was, you have 15 minutes. I want you to describe the scene. Well, my mind went, and in 15 minutes, I had the beginning and maybe close to the end. It turned out not to be the end of the Mona Lisa sisters. And I dropped everything. It was just, I couldn't let go of it. It was just had me trapped. And that's one of the reasons I got the MFA. It was my thesis paper, the whole 9 yards. And I don't know how many times I went down the rabbit hole doing research on it to make sure that everything was historically accurate. And of course, there were times like the railroad station in Paris. I kept reading about it and going. Finally, I said, this scene's going to last like 2 pages, and you spent like 20 hours reading about it. So it was again searching for historical fact that I would throw in. So then I went back to Robbers, and it's completely different. You know, there's no question about it. I found it to be harder, even though I had already started it, you know, and I threw out Detective Cramer, but it was different. And I really did have the beginning and the end, and how am I going to get there? And I threw in some things that I'm not sure yeah, I do. Again, I threw in some things like both the robbers were Marines and my hero was a Marine in 2 different wars, to show that, you know, even though they were bad guys and the bad guys joined the Marines to escape under false names, they were really good Marines, you know, and they went through some pretty tough times. And I wanted to point out some of those tough times, you know, like being on a hell ship, going to being slaves in Japan. My good guy, in the good guy thing, where he gets all these wounds and stuff, and Robert Kennemore is in the foxhole with him. Robert Kennemore is the father of my best friend, and he was awarded the Medal of Honor for exactly what he did in that foxhole. He wasn't alive to read it, but his son was. I don't know if I answered your question, Darlene, but I'm going to duck over to Mike. He's going to throw me another hardball.
Well, you know, you developed as Sally said, there's an empathy, and it's difficult to do with bad guys. bad guys are the kind of really the protagonists of your book. But my question was about what particular challenges did you encounter in writing? You've written two historicals now with set in different times. What are the particular challenges you found writing about an era that's past and probably one that you've never experienced? So.
Well, I have a degree in history, so I finally was able to put a little bit of it to use. So I was a little familiar, even though I was one of those beach bums trying to avoid the draft in the beach house when I got my BA. So I was used to research. My grandfather, my great-grandfather great-great-grandfather immigrated from Germany, was immediately drafted, wounded, got out, went back in, things like that. My grandfather was in World War I. He was gassed. He would never say one single word to me about what happened. And he grew up in that period. My dad was in World War II, and he would only speak about what he did before he got to Germany and after the armistice. He never ever said one word about what happened there, except that one time he got strafed and they ran a truck into the woods to get away from the German. But I wanted to bring some of those things out. So I did a little bit more deep research on those particular parts of it. And the fact that I had my buddy's father was a Medal of Honor winner. He and I went to Quantico and visited the Marine Museum and stuff like that. He had letters that he wrote his wife during that period of time. So we were able to pick up some of that. Mike, you got me going in the wrong direction. But it's completely different. And people ask me, well, if you did two historicals, why are you doing this thing now? My book that came out this year, New Liberty, because I wanted to get away from the historical stuff. I wanted to come to a more recent time. I spent 5 years, 5 of the years while I was working on New Liberty, I volunteered as an investigator at my old police department. And I spent quite a bit of the time on missing person cases and other cold cases. And watching the police officers, and I have to tell you, Sally, they are different. Many of them have the same thoughts and beliefs that I know Darlene and Mike and I shared. But others, they could give a shit. It's like going to the gas station and responding only when they have to. But I learned a lot about the hardworking police officers and detectives and what they're doing, and gained a new appreciation for them. And I will probably, when I get to book 3, I'm probably going to go to the deputy chief and ask if I can come and volunteer, but not for 5 years, maybe another 6 months or something to get a better look at it. And writing New Liberty, I'm finding that I'm using older methods for the most part. The Harry Bosch's get off your ass and knock on doors. These cops aren't doing that, but I want them to. So I need book 3. I also have developed a great appreciation. I'm part Native American, and I've developed a great appreciation, and I'm going to work it into book 2 and really make heavy in book 3, missing and murdered Indigenous women, because I ran across that when I was working missing person cases. And I will use true events from those 5 years, but rewrite them in different ways so we don't know who they are. But I found 3 or 4 murders that I could not get anybody to investigate. Anyway, Mike, I hope I answered part of your question.
Certainly.
Going back to characters, you had quite a host of police characters, and I admittedly got a little confused sometimes remembering who was who, but I particularly enjoyed the one character that everybody thought was a total jerk, and that they would always, try to like tell him something so that he didn't show up, or like give him the I forgot his name. Could you remind us of that character, and was he based on someone in your real experience?
Well, he was the deputy sheriff. I'm certainly not going to paint a police officer in a bad light. We're the good guys, the deputy sheriffs, and I know Donnell loves a couple of deputy sheriffs. They've been really good to her. But yeah, I ran across people like that. And I had one case where we were going to, I had a search warrant I wanted to serve on Sonny Barger's home. And as a result of that, he did go back to prison for a couple of years. But when we rendezvoused a half mile away from his house, there was a TV cameraman waiting there for us. Somebody spilled the beans, and I blamed it on a deputy sheriff.
Who, George?
I'm sorry?
Who'd you blame it on?
A deputy, not a
Oh.
police officer.
Okay.
And we never found out who leaked, but somebody did. And it was probably somebody chatting on a police radio, and that was being monitored. That's why none of my people, we didn't use the radios until we hit the place. So those things happen. Even police officers get chatty catty from time to time, and things get leaked.
Anybody else have any one of the 4 Sally Hanleys have a question for George?
I love my new pseudonym. Thank you very much. This is awesome. I enjoyed the characterization. I have 2 of these books, by the way. So, and I ordered 2 of them because I was going to do a giveaway. What I appreciated is that your cops are human and your robbers are human. I loved the video that you prepared. And I wanted you to talk about I don't know how you capsize or capsulize a video with all this material into what, a 2-minute video? Is it
Less
1
than
minute?
2 minutes. I think it's a minute. I would really want to brag about that. I had nothing to do with it. There's a writer that I know some of you know her name, Lisa Towles, Towles. She has a new book coming out. In fact, she was on my blog on Sunday. So if you want to see her, she's there last Sunday, just one day, because I felt I owed her, so I put it up. She does those, and she put it together, and she refused to let me pay her, so I sent her cash in the mail so she couldn't shred the check. But Lisa puts those together, and she's says they go much over a minute, people lose interest. So she's hammering home stuff, boom, boom, boom. And one of the issues that comes up in preparing those is copyright. I sent her some pictures that I wanted of some Navy corpsmen treating a wounded Marine. And we couldn't find the owner of the copyright, or if it was copyrighted. So she refused to use it. And she was right. And if I had been doing that, I probably would have used it and then, out of line. I highly recommend her. The trailer for New Liberty, we made a trade, New Liberty 2, I'm going to pay her. And New Liberty 3, I'll pay her. She charges $300, which is actually pretty on the low end, but she is fun to work with.
So George, does this new book sound like you're starting a series? Are you having
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And the reason, I'll tell you why I'm starting a series, and I'm sure Mike and Donnell especially, I think Darlene can back me up. If you're doing nothing but standalones, you're going to go broke. And I've been attending for the last couple of years 20K Books Las Vegas, and actually, even though I love Mike's conference, I get a great deal out of this because it's all for writers on how to sell and how to produce and what have you. And they constantly say series, so you can build a following that will want to see your next book. And maybe they don't see your first book until your third or fourth, they go back. So as much as I like writing standalones, I decided if I was going to make any money, which I probably won't, I have to do a series, so I'm already working on book 3. Actually, I'm restarting book 3 because I had a major computer problem the first of the year, and I lost book 3 manuscript. And I have 3 backup systems. It's gone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Anyway.
You have my deepest sympathy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Rebecca, I know you have a question.
Oh, well, it's a little off. It relates to what you've been talking about, but it's a little off topic, so I was hesitating. How do you personally, if it's not too personal question, deal with the question of evil? I mean, people do bad stuff, and I'm currently working on something where a psychopathic character, I hesitate to use that word, but there's a character who's fundamentally flawed and could be labeled as evil. And so it's an interesting exercise to, assuming that I myself am not evil, which I hope I'm not. It's difficult, I think, to write about that. And how do you deal with that? Well, I'll just ask you, how do you deal with that in your head and in your writing? I mean, is there any craft clue you can give us to how to write a wicked character?
I love that question. I am so happy you asked that. In New Liberty, the book 1, and then book 2 and book 3. But in book 1, I delved into street gangs, and they're evil for the most part. They're very evil. And I've seen a lot, again, I try to base a lot of what I've written about things that I've seen and experienced, or other officers or people I know have experienced. I can't write horror because I don't understand it, I don't know it. But I've dealt with evil even as a private investigator and a corporate investigator for over 40 years. And it's not that I ignore it or bounce it off my back. I know it's there, and I've seen a lot of it. And I want to, and I expand on it. And Donnell and I have an acquaintance who writes about dogs, and I killed a dog in Robbers, and I'm going to kill a dog in New Liberty. But I think that most of my readers, when that dog dies, will cheer, because that dog is a product of pure evil. Donnell?
Jack here, George, for just a minute, because what I see in your writing is fearless creating. It's that you're not sitting there thinking, what is my reader going to want from me? You're doing what's in your gut, and you're doing what comes that you want them to see the visual. Some of it's visceral. And I told you, I said, this is hard for me to read because I'm a victim's advocate. I don't like to see the abuse, but it's true. There's no doubt about it. There is evil and good. And the psychology behind it is one thing, but how do you ever go, oh my gosh, this is too much? And you said you don't write horror, but you do write horrific events. Can you comment on that?
Yeah. And you said what my reader will think. You know what? I know authors ask that often. I'm sitting here thinking, I don't think I've ever asked what my readers would want. I want to write what I want. And one of my heroes who died this week is Cormac McCarthy. And I've written reviews, and I talk about Blood Meridian, and there's some horrific stuff. This man's imagination is beyond belief. So I want to be a little bit like McCarthy, but I know I can't ever do that. And it's like, just, I love you, you love me, whatever. Donnell writes stuff that sometimes horrifies me, but it's written so well that it had to be there. And I don't want, oh God, now I'm really in trouble. Cozies. I am not a cozy fan. When we have, we develop friendships across here, and people visit my blog that are cozies, and I read some of their books, and their craftsmanship, that's what I'm looking at, because the story doesn't do crap for me most of the times, but the quality of the writing, I learn from it. But some of them I can't. Anyway, I couldn't write a cozy if my life depended upon it. I have to write what I see. Donnell, I appreciate what you say. It's like this dog that I kill. When you first meet him, it's a horrific scene. And until I kill him, we allude to his killings and what the master of this dog has him do. I don't put you through that horror of the actual deaths again.
Well, and
Caution
Robert,
you, I beg your pardon. I would caution you, you are not writing cozies. You are not, and I will tell you, as someone who did ride-alongs with deputy sheriffs, by the way, we would go out to a really rough part of town, part of the county, and there would be pit bulls, and there would be dogs that were trained. Somebody comes on our property, attack. And I would see them say, you restrain that dog or that dog is dead. They didn't have any. And those are the things that belong in your books, George. And I get it. You have certain readers that will throw the book against the wall if you hurt an animal, but you can hurt a kid. That just really gets me. So that's my comment for the day. I don't have a problem if you kill the dog.
well, you
I don't-
killed the dog in robbers and cops. The interesting thing is that the character felt more remorse over killing that dog than he did about killing the man who abused him. So, and we definitely could identify with that. But I have to say, I was really happy when they started robbing banks because it was less horrific than the experiences they had in their lives up until that point.
Mhm.
Uh, Well, we've kind of reached the end of our hour. Does anybody have a final parting comment or question for George?
I do.
Michael?
George, why don't you tell us a little why don't you tell us a little bit about your newest one, New Liberty?
Yeah, well, I did it a little bit. This is where I killed a real bad dog. It's
That's the only thing that happens in it.
yeah, right.
It's a new series, correct?
Yeah, and my protagonist is Hector McGill Navarro. Hector McGill Navarro is the son of one of my best friends, and he was kind of not a good kid, getting in all kinds of trouble. But he turned his life around. Now he's a professional chef, and someday will probably be known. And I loved his name because his mom always calls him Hector McGill, not Hector. So I asked her and him if I could use his name. So Hector McGill Navarro is a young Mexican. He's 100 proof, just like my daughter-in-law. And I see her in him and him and her. One of my daughter-in-laws. Oh, by the way, in 8 months, we've had 3 grandchildren born, and we're going to have another one in 3 weeks. Anyway, so he comes out to Arizona, and I create a fictitious city because I didn't want to have to do all of the research that I've done on other books. Originally, it was called Liberty, but then I found that there was a little neighborhood named Liberty, and so I made it New Liberty, and I like it even better. And he's a young cop there, and he's out, basically works in the Disneyland where nothing ever happens. He's going to get promoted, so they send him to gangs so he gets some street time. And here he learns all about the terrible side of town. And we're going to, I keep getting my books together. Anyway, a Mexican gang. It's just really terrible. And he's smart. His parents are Harvard professors. He's probably Mensa, but he's very naive and he learns a lot. He's paired with a cop who was a Marine. And I was a sailor. Why do I have Marines? Who suffers from PTSD badly. He's an alcoholic and he shouldn't be on the street. He should be fired or, forced off. But he does all kinds of bad things. Not evil, just bad. And he's all under the influence on duty. And he ultimately commits suicide. And his character is based upon the police officer.
I'm on a Zoom call right now.
The man who convinced me, the police officer who convinced me to get a job with San Diego Police Department, who does a real bad thing, you'll figure it out, and ultimately commits suicide. So he's based on a true character. Gangs are based on some exposure to gangs in the Oakland area and their criminal activities and what they do. And another gang that's a black gang, and they don't like each other and they do evil things. And I don't want to get too deep into it because I don't think anybody here, maybe Mike, you bought a copy, right? You better say yes. I too, so I get 2 royalties. And here we have this bright, naive cop who's coming to grips with the evil in the world and how he has to deal with it. And he gets his first informant. And his training officer was kind of like my mentor. I think the term that really fits was my mentor once called me, "You dumb shit." You got to start thinking, you got to start seeing the picture. Now, one of the things that we learn early on is that when they run somebody across the stage and you have to write about them. Well, most of us, we see the figure, but they want us to see as much as we can, the hair, the face, the glasses, the beard, what they're wearing, blah, 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 a number of things. And when you first start, even after they tell you, you can't do it. But as you grow, and I'm using this as an analogy, you learn to understand and see what's going on around you. And he's a quick study. And he gets in trouble because a number of reasons, but not because he did anything really wrong, just stupid, inexperienced. So we grow with him, and we have some really good characters. And my favorite character, I kill in the second book. So when you buy the first book, you got to think, who's his favorite character? Who's he going to kill? And in the second book, I don't kill any animals, and I don't plan to kill any books in moving down the road. And if I ever kill a kid, I'm done writing. That's never, ever, ever going to happen. I'm not even going to have a kid in an accident. I've lost 2 kids, and I am not going to put myself or a reader through harming a child. You know, it's just not going to happen. And there's some good characters. And Sally, you mentioned that you got confused. I got really balled out for having too many characters, way too many. And I went through after the book was ready to go to my final editor, and I took out like a half a dozen characters.
Oh,
And in New Liberty, when I got done with the first manuscript, I went back and said, who can I not name? Who can I take out? So there are some you just have to have. And
well, we look forward to that next book, George, and to your series. We wish you luck. I want to thank you on behalf of the Upstate chapter of Sisters in Crime for moderating these 3 books. All 3 selections were fantastic, and we really enjoyed having the PSWA members who joined us for this. And we begin next quarter. I just want to do a little plug for our next moderator, who is L.M. Whitaker. Linda Whitaker is the president of our chapter. She writes techno thrillers, and they're really great. She's got experience in AI and technology that she combines in her thrillers, and they're really good. We'll be reading her first book, but the first book she selected for next month is a book called Find You First by Linwood Barclay. And I've only begun to read it, so I can't really comment on it yet, but I hope that some of you, I'll keep you on our mailing list. You can always
Please.
opt out if you need to, and I will keep you on the mailing list so that you can join us for future book clubs if you would like to.
Thank
Anything
you.
else,
thank you.
George?
I want to thank you for having me as your moderator for this quarter. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And thank you for having me today. I just love to talk about.
We never guessed that. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for
Bye.
having us. We were delighted to do it. Thank you so much. Have a great week. Another month. Hope to see you all in another month.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.